Welcome, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order of the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee. This is the Tuesday, February 17th meeting. So thank you all for being here. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the February 3rd, 2026 meeting. I hope you've had an opportunity to review. If you have, I'll ask for a motion and a second. Have a motion, we get a second. Motion and second. All those in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed, same. And the motion passes. Thank you all. Item number 3 on the agenda is the review and discuss survey results. And we'll turn to Trudy Lewis. Come on in, Joe.
Yay.
Do you have a note from your parents?
Yay. Okay, so this evening, buckle up. We've got great information. Last time was a lot of fun, and this time will be as well. Today we're going to go over the review of impact of the projects that are under consideration. We're going to compare general obligation bonds to certificates of obligation. We're going to discuss the committee survey results, review updated project considerations and the associated tax rate implications. We're going to talk about debt capacity within the existing debt tax rate, discuss legislative status related to tax rates, and then also confirm some thoughts for the committee for our next steps. Okay, so we'll start with sort of the end goal in mind, if you will. I wanted to make sure that the committee was aware of what our city council adopted in 2024 as our mission, vision, and goals. This really underlines all that we do as staff, what we are trying to deliver to citizens, and what really guides the actions of the city council. So the vision of the city is to be the standard for transparent, resident-focused, fiscally responsible, business-welcoming municipal government in Texas. Our mission is to promote an exceptional quality of life for our community by being resident-focused, fiscally responsible, and business-friendly. And our goals are listed here: to drive operational excellence into every area, to become easier to do business with, to steward the public's money well, be a great place to work, revitalize neighborhoods and commercial corridors, engage residents to enhance connection to the city and their neighbors, and finally, to improve safety, security, and structure every day. So that said, we're going to jump into some terms. The first one is the definition of a general obligation bond. In Texas, it is a type of municipal debt that state and local governments can issue that finances public infrastructure. It is backed by ad valorem tax or property tax. The issuer, in this case would be the city, pledges to provide for the funding backed by the credit or the pledge, if you will, of property taxes, and that we can leverage sufficient levy in order to cover those bond payments. And it does require voter approval. So because it is relying on property tax revenues, a GO bond must be approved by voters in a public vote, and this does ensure that taxpayers are consenting to the increased obligation. We had this slide up last time. This is a reminder about the municipal GO bonds that we have issued since 1985. I want to call your attention to the last two, one in 2012, that was for the municipal complex at $48 million. And then the last one was in November of 2020. That was for street improvements at $49.8 million. So those were very similar in total cost. We'll readdress those numbers a little bit later. A certificate of obligation is also a type of debt that a city can issue that requires council approval. So we don't go to the voters. We aren't required to go to voters for these types of bonds. But if at least 5% of qualified voters petition for an election, it could have to go to an election at that point. This can be paid for by revenues other than property tax, like park fees or water utility fees, aquatic park fees, sales tax, etc., or from property tax. So it could be paid from either. Although similar to general obligation bonds in a lot of ways, they tend to be a little smaller in dollar amount. They also tend to have a slightly faster response for routine needs, so more of an annual basis sort of need, as opposed to something that's going to happen over several years. And the issuance process is really through public notice We do allow for public input. We require that. We've got a 45-day period of time that we have to make sure the public is aware of an intent by the city council, but it tends to be faster than a GO process because it isn't actually having to go on a ballot itself. So the types of projects that we have issued COs for here recently, and I say recently in the last few years, has been for the Green Extreme replacement, which is one of the attractions at the aquatic park. That was issued by the city and fully paid for by the aquatic park revenues. We've also done preventative street maintenance for $5 million. That was something that was paid for by property taxes. We've replaced several pieces of equipment, fire engine, ambulance, crew cab, dump truck, at a total of about $900,000, also something that's paid for by the INS rate. We sometimes have large-scale IT infrastructure projects, so we've issued about $2.5 million in those types of debt, and also facility maintenance and repairs. So you'll notice the dollar amount of these versus the dollar amounts of the GO bonds that we just talked about. This gives you one-page snapshot comparison between GOs and COs. So again, GOs require voter approval, whereas COs do not. Their GOs are best used for larger scale, very visible sorts of projects. COs we typically use for utilities, roofs, heavy equipment, things that are not quite as visible typically by the public. In terms of timeline, certainly this work is extensive for a GO bond, as you all are experiencing, and we appreciate your efforts to do that. For a CO bond, it tends to be a little shorter. We can sometimes in about 45 to 60 days go from a notice of intent to actually fulfilling the process. In terms of transparency, GOs, of course, require voter approval. And for COs, they still go through a public process. They're still posted on a public agenda. They're still discussed in open forum. They're still voted on by the city council in open forum and allow for a lot of feedback from residents, but it's not necessarily a direct vote of citizens. Again, on the dollar amount piece, GOs tend to be very large, whereas COs tend to be for a shorter term and a smaller dollar amount. And on the tax impacts, GOs certainly are coming from property taxes, whereas COs could come from either property tax or something that's coming from some sort of self-supporting operation. Okay, we're going to get into survey results from here. As you all know, the survey was sent out to all committee members on February the 4th, so the day after our last meeting. They were due back about a week later on Tuesday the 10th. Staff has reviewed the results. Information presented today is anonymous, so we don't know who said what. We just know what everyone said in total, and that's what we're going to provide you back with today. 29 people were sent the email and invited to participate, and we had 23 to submit back surveys. So we had a pretty high response rate from the survey itself. We're going to do these in order by how they were asked on the survey itself. So the first question was to rank the following projects in order of priority, the top being most important. So I'll give everybody a minute to absorb the information. It's quite a bit of data here. So by priority, you can see that fire station number 2, followed by fire station number 3, were listed as the top 2 priorities. The next was major streets, followed by the service center. We talked a lot about a title, sort of what's in a name. So for the purpose of the survey, we wanted to make sure everyone remembered what operations were operating out of that facility, and so that's why we got that extended name there. And then the next was street reconstruction for residential streets. All of the library projects fell after that, and you can see what the rank order was according to the committee results. One thing I do want to point out about the library piece is there's this ranking for sort of what's the overall priority, but then you'll see based on other questions, every project didn't stay in the exact same order. So we'll see some changes as we go. This next question, what projects would you recommend to take to voters for general obligation bond funding? So here we ended up seeing slight different responses. First being the fire station number 3, then major streets, followed by fire station number 2, then residential streets, and then we've got the service center. And then the next one becomes the community room expansion for the library, followed by all the other library projects. Okay.
So that is not a ranking, that is saying, for instance, that 30% of respondents thought that we should take the library expansion to the voters.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm.
But the question was asked in a ranking form, where this is one of
I
those that you
remember
dragged and
ranking.
dropped
I
in the
remember.
order that you thought, yeah.
It is, but when you look at the percentages, yeah, when you look at the percentages,
I don't think I did, but for instance, if I had dragged that one all the way down to the bottom, did that mean to y'all that didn't recommend putting it on there? Or
Well,
that it's-
so yeah, so you're asked to, yes, that would be, well, it was at the bottom of the list of what you would put on for GOs. I see what you're saying. The phrasing of the question doesn't say rank them, but the question format was one that you all dragged and dropped, I think, yeah.
So this was not whether or not do you take this to the voter, but just rank.
In priority order.
In priority
What
order.
would you, yeah.
we also asked about certificates of obligation. So question number 3 was, which projects would you recommend funding through certificates of obligation? And so you can see how that shifted for the committee results. Almost a complete flip from GOs, not 100%, but very close, very close. Question 4, what is a reasonable timeline for the delivery of recommended capital projects? So you can see by the pie chart that there were, of course, different years offered for that range. We had most people respond, 52%, in the 8 to 10 year range. But if we look at sort of, what created the supermajority, if you will, it was really between 5 and 10 years. About 87% of people were in that bucket. Question 5, what level of funding do you recommend for residential street improvements? Remember, we had major separate from residential, so we wanted to make sure that we drilled in on this. 52% of respondents said 17.8 million, 23 streets. But if we sort of look for that supermajority, 83% were saying somewhere between 17.8 and 21.2 million for residential streets. Which is interesting because that wasn't necessarily the total amount, right? We had all the different levels for streets, and so we were really looking to gauge from the committee, based on the different levels, what did you all want to potentially move forward with? And for major streets, we had 52% at 51.5 million. Again, that supermajority was between the 51.5 and the 63.1 total for major streets. What is the total general obligation bond funding you feel should be on the ballot? No one bucket got more than 50% of the responses, but if we look at sort of the highest two together, about 73%, were somewhere between 125 million and 175 million. What level of tax rate impact do you think the public would support? 61% said somewhere between 4 and 6 cents.
And during the last presentation we had, you threw everything in, and it went up to 4 cents in the most conservative scenario.
Yes.
Which is that we don't redevelop any property, we don't develop any undeveloped property, nobody's ad valorem goes up for 10 years.
Yes.
Some horrible thing.
Well,
It's never been experienced.
well, just wait. just wait.
Also, since you're asking questions, I have to correct, I went to ask Jennifer, because she created that survey. Number one was the only ranking one. The other ones you selected projects, and you could select as many projects as you wanted under those questions, which ones do you want to fund under GOs or which ones COs. But what it did is in the background it gave so many points. So what that means is people, like if she went back to that slide, 87% of the people picked Fire Station 2 as a project, and then it went down. So those lower ones would mean people either didn't select those or only a few of the respondents selected those for those
Just thought they
categories.
were
Yeah,
general
sorry.
engagement.
Yeah,
But there's a bit of a disconnect in that quite a few people chose to not do all the streets, but then the majority of the people chose 4 to 6 cents
Mhm.
tax increase. Because 4 to 6 cents gets all the streets done and then some.
Look at you skipping ahead. We're going to get there. Wait for it. I promise.
Two pages in.
Right? Right? We're just like, we're warming up. Like, we're getting there. Okay, so when we put together all the results and we sort of say, okay, what is the survey really telling us? What we find is about an 8 to 10 year capital program, general obligations in terms of what's really over that 50% and just kind of right there is about 125 to 155 total. Tax rate impact 4 to 6 cents, but for the projects, everyone seems to agree on the fire stations. The streets seem to be looking like it's more priority blue. Remember, we had 3 levels for the streets, and we'll go through those again in just a minute. The service center, and also for the library, remember there were 4 different projects, but the community room seemed to be the one that more consistently was getting support for the GO side of the house. We're only talking GOs at this point. That tended to be from the survey results where the majority of people landed. So as a review, fire station number 2 would include the rebuild at an estimated cost a little north of $12 million. Fire station number 3, again, complete rebuild with an estimated cost at about $14.1 million. For the major streets, these are the reds. Everyone seemed to be okay with the reds. This goes through 16 streets and also the blue streets. So this was level 2 of the street list. Combined, the red and the blue on majors is about $51.5 million. For residential streets, all the red is about 18 streets, plus all of the blue, which is an additional 5 streets, gets us to about 17.7 on residential streets. So this is that summary page we talked about last time that shows the 3 different levels. So based on the survey, it looks like level red and level blue seem to have majority support, not as much for the green level streets. The total cost associated with the red and the blue combined is right at $69.3 million, but we'd want to round that to about 75 just to make sure we can do project delivery. If that is inflation, if that is, well, if there's a street that's listed in the blue section, but the other part of that street is listed in the green section, and the committee feels like we need to do the whole street. Let's not just do one project and not the other. Those sort of considerations, we want to be able to come back to you to confirm with you all as a group, and we'll do that through the survey process. But for the purpose of giving the big picture, this is what the majority of the respondents said.
So I'm remembering back to previous meetings, all those street subtotals had contingencies built in at that level too, right? So we're taking streets that already have a healthy contingency, and I remember this from the fire station
Sure,
presentation too.
sure.
We're summing them all up,
Mm-hmm.
and then come to 69 million and change, and we're calling it 75. So we're adding more contingency.
We are making sure also that for the purpose of doing our scenarios, if this committee decides you're only going to do part of Maine and I want both parts of Maine, that we aren't having to go back and reinvent the whole wheel for some of that, and also that we're confident we can deliver reasonably the number of streets intended within that blue line based on the committee feedback. We're not done. Today is us giving you back survey results that we've interpreted and we've run some modeling for. We definitely want to hear more from you all to reconcile and confirm where you want us to land on all of those details.
so so you will have another survey coming after this meeting, and one of those questions is going to be related to that street comment that Trudy just made, where on the list, so y'all have the list, and y'all brought up that there are segments of streets, and some segments of those streets rank higher than other segments. Iron Horse is an example of that. So we're going to be asking you, would you just want to combine those, since we're doing part of Iron Horse? So you'll be able to give us feedback on that. You also, the 75 million is what we would suggest. Again, it's this committee's decision. So on these surveys, if you're saying it should be 70, then we're taking that. There'll be an open-ended comments, just like there was on this last one. We didn't summarize and report that, but we do read those, and it feeds into what we're recommending to y'all. Does that make sense?
If I could jump
Sort of.
into,
No.
on the estimates for the streets do have contingency built in, but each of those streets doesn't have a highly detailed cost estimate. We don't know what we don't know. Some of that will come up during design, some of it may come up during construction, so there are some generalizations that went into those estimates. So it could turn out, maybe our as-built drawings are inaccurate. Chapman is a good example of the current bond. We used kind of general assumptions for that redesign. Turns out there's way more in terms of utilities that we have to contend with than we had planned on. So that's where having that additional wiggle room is helpful.
But on the whole, the previous bond for 49 million and change, are you getting it done with that much money and less?
Yes.
Okay.
That much money, not less.
What I mean is within that budget.
Yes.
Yes.
But were there
And did
other circumstances that went into that to stay under budget, like other funding that helped?
Well, I think one of the big savings on the current bond was on the residential side that helped to feed some of the overages on the major side because of how we handled that, the residential rehabilitation, heavy load on existing staff to kind of go in. We didn't turn these over, they weren't turnkey projects where we turned it over to an engineer for full plans. Our folks went in kind of with survey equipment in targeted areas where we needed to address heaving curb and gutter and so forth. We GC'd the utility work or did it ourselves. And that's something we're going to struggle with doing that again from a manpower standpoint and a scope of work standpoint, along with our preventive maintenance. So there are going to be additional costs on the residential side that we didn't have this time around.
We also ended up receiving a grant from the FDA, I think it was, for the
EDA.
FDA. For the part of Iron Horse that did get completed with this last round, and that allowed us really to come in budget at the end of the day. We were hopeful that it would allow us to do some additional streets, but the costs of materials started going up kind of like mid-bond, so it's what's helping us achieve it within.
So are there streets here that could apply to also, like the Main Street development or any of those? Smithfield, where a grant or something could kick into?
Smithfield is one that, I know that's touching an area where we've had participation with COG in the past that could be a candidate. We don't have anything in the works right now as far as grant submittals. Because they're typically going to go, Bloodview, we've got Tarrant County assistance on. Iron Horse, that was one of the silver linings of going
The
through
pandemic.
COVID, is we got that funding. We don't know of anything.
So I have a quick question. It's a two-part question, actually. So how much, and maybe we talked about this a long time ago, how much money in total do we have to play with, right? And if that be the case, so if we are kind of over budgeting for some of these projects and, what have you, say for example, like the library project, will the committee have an opportunity to say, if we reduce this overage to say 70 versus 75, could that then go to fund a portion of the library project versus giving this overage type of thing? So first question, how much money in total again, and then will we have the opportunity to say, let's reduce the overage but apply it to another project?
Question number 2 is a lot easier. Yes. Yes, you can. But the answer to question number 1, how much money do we have to spend? It depends on what you all would like the outcome to be as to how much it will cost, and therefore what does that mean for the tax rate. What we discussed last time was if 100% of the projects that we've been discussing came forward, that cost is $155 million, and that would create a 4-cent increase on the tax rate. Now we are discussing, based on the survey, where you all have prioritized all the projects and given feedback on what you feel like the max tax rate should be, priorities for GO versus CO, et cetera. What is that number? What are those projects? How is that different than the 155? So I promise we're going to get there to provide you with all of that information back.
But at the end of the day, the decision is going to be up to this committee in terms of the amount of money that you're going to recommend to the council, and then what projects are included in that. And the only thing I'll say about overages and under whatever is the amount of money that is put related to a bond proposition. Once the bond proposition is out there, it can't be used for something else. So that money, so if the voters approve, all of the streets or whatever, and let's say it came under budget at the end of the day, we couldn't take that extra money that was, if we said 70 million, for example, for streets, and we ended up, okay, at the end of the 10 years or whatever it is, there's 5 million left, or we could only use that additional money for a street project. We could not transfer it to the library or something else. Hold on, John, I think Sean had a question too.
Okay, sure.
I'm sorry.
So let's, if we assume we did the 75 million, and I'll almost talk about it, if the actual cost came in like 85 million, what's the process there? Like, I mean, are we just gonna leave half a street done? Like, what happens if everything gets passed and it's over budget?
Council job.
Underfunded.
So we would try to find additional funds either through reserves or if we still have the ability to issue COs to cover that additional amount. Yes, but that's also why we try to be as estimate for things like inflation and stuff like that, since it's a 10-year stretch that we're looking at. John, sorry.
Well, I apologize for missing one or more of the last meetings, but I seem to remember on a couple of meetings ago when I had asked the question and we were kind of going down the road of when I first moved here 5 or 6 years ago. I remember the 2020 bond proposal in the list of streets and the total volume of streets that we had to repair.
Yes.
And that only a certain fraction of them were being addressed with that first bond election.
Correct.
And now we're addressing another chunk of it, but we still have, so by no means is this list a comprehensive list of all the, even the list that we're, the red and the blue list, it's not the whole list of what we have to repair, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Now, the red, blue, and green, the way we presented it last time, and if you don't have those handouts, I think Jennifer might have extras. But those are all streets that need and anything we presented to y'all during this process is streets that need complete and total reconstruction.
The worst.
Preventive maintenance isn't gonna do anything. But on top of that, we do have a preventive street maintenance program every year that does things like crack sealing and potholes and that kind of thing that comes out of general fund money. In fact, those 5 million in COs for streets was to help do additional streets over a couple of years. Now that entire amount is funded out of general fund, some reserves and some operating. But anyway, that gets to TMI. These streets are only ones that need complete and total reconstruction. But it doesn't, even the combo, yes, I mean there's, and I think we handed out the total street list with all the condition ratings, so you could look at that and see how many would be below a certain condition rating that needs something. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess the question that I was really trying to wrap my head around in that meeting back then, and I don't know that we got to a definitive answer, but what we got kind of to a ballpark answer is that we're still several $100 million away from being completely caught up in street repairs. Is that a fair? I mean, I don't know what that. I would love to be able to wrap my mind around what we've addressed so far and what we still have
Okay. And I think
outstanding.
we kind of presented that, but we can send out sort of a summary of that as well.
Yeah.
I'll just also say that I don't know that you would ever, any city would ever get to a point that you would address every street that needs, either a reconstruction or some sort of preventive maintenance. I mean, you could, if the voters would approve a tax rate, you know, I don't even know what the tax rate would be to do that. And then the other question I think we discussed at one of the meetings was, or the other answer to that was, the other problem is addressing all that work and making sure it gets done in a timely manner, but also so that you don't irritate your citizens, because now, great, the streets are getting redone, but you've got every city in the street under construction. So it's a balancing act, yeah.
But to her point, if we had $5 million left over, it's not like we're gonna run out of street projects to work on, right?
Exactly,
Okay.
and that's what would
Yeah.
happen if by some miracle, we were way under budget and the voters approved 75 or whatever it is, we would
Yeah.
we would work down that ranked list that you all have already looked at and participated in the
So that
ranking.
more streets.
Right. But we are gonna get to a section where we're kind of recommending an amount and projects, and we're gonna tell you, we did run some scenarios of what does a zero tax rate amount look like? What's an amount that's not 4, but it's not 0, and gets most of it done, and then how would we recommend funding the other projects? Because the other thing you have to consider, like we've been talking about, is if you put something up to the voters and it gets denied, you can't issue any debt to do that project for at least 3 years. And so, so we have to sort of take that into consideration with some of these that we're required to do. So Trudy, you know, we've kind of, the three of us put our heads together and came up with some recommendations for y'all to look at and consider and even tweak. And so you'll also have an opportunity to weigh in on those in this survey that we're going to send out after the meeting.
Okay, so going to the library, remember there were 4 total projects that were submitted in reference to library improvements. And so one of those was the community room expansion. When we look at the estimated cost and all that was presented with that, based on the feedback and the total amounts that the committee felt that would be supported or that you all may recommend for consideration, the southwest corner build out didn't necessarily fit into that total number when you look at that relative to some other parts of the library. So we did an update to this slide that just shows if we did the community room itself, which would require the bathroom renovation, with all the things that would be included with that, the cost is about $9 million for just that particular scope. So we are recommending that you all consider that based on your feedback about total activity. And then we've got the service center. Again, we did put in the survey a longer name to remind everyone what all is covered by this operation, but altogether that cost is right at $25 million. So if we put all of these together, we're talking 26.3 for the fire stations, the library room expansion at $9 million, streets at 75, and the service center at 25. That creates a total update. So last time we talked about $155 million. That's at $135,300,000. And this would be an estimated 2-cent increase for the tax rate. So the committee feedback was somewhere between 4 and 6. We presented earlier 4. But if we went with these project scopes, it's about $2 million on the tax rate. We also asked for information and feedback on non-general obligation bond projects. So what would be remaining are the library circulation room, the library 412 compliance, and also the library elevators. So we've looked at different ways we could potentially look at funding those projects if the committee felt that they still wanted to see those things done, but maybe not with the GO. So we could look at reserves, existing city resources and dollars we have. We could look at possibly issuing some COs. We could do some value engineering. So we take sort of what was the first look at the scope and to narrow that. Sure.
Go back one slide, the 2-cent estimated tax increase. What timeline was that based upon? 5, 7, 8, 10 years?
I'm sorry, this was based on a 10-year.
On 10 years.
On 10 years.
With still the 0 growth that Justin talked about.
It is. It is.
It's a 2-cent conceptual tax increase.
Mm-hmm.
It's marketing here. What did we market during the last bond?
I'm so glad you asked. Although we were going to get to that, but we'll go ahead and say it. So when we issued the debt to do City Hall, That election was in 2012, and you guys remember from the slide earlier, that was about 48 million. We said your rate won't go up more than 4 cents. So the rate went from 57 cents and some change to 61 cents. And it stayed there for a few years, and then it started coming back down. We did a bond election in November of 2020. Our rate has actually gone down since that.
That's the one I'm talking about.
And the streets were at a little more than what we did for City Hall. So that was at 49.8, and our rate has actually gone down.
We advertised during the bond for that street,
4 cents.
4
We said
cents,
it could
and
go
it
up as
didn't
much
go
as
up,
4
it
cents.
went down
That's right,
instead.
7 cents.
So this whole economic model here is based on no increase in the ad valorem base. It's also based on a conservative rate. So in an extremely conservative theoretical model here, you could have an increase of 4 cents.
Two.
Two in
Two
this
cents.
one. But if you threw everything in, 4 cents.
Oh, you mean the other projects?
Yeah, the other one's a $20 million worth of stuff that's not here. But in reality, it could go down.
It could. We would love to see that happen. We're going to talk about things that are outside of everyone's control in this room that affect our values and how much we're able to receive in property taxes. That speaks to why we did the modeling the way that we did it.
But if you don't do these things now,
Sure.
you have to do them again. You have to do it someday. I mean, very little of this stuff is discretionary. I don't think any of it is personally, but it doesn't go away. For instance, if we'd have done more streets during the last bond issue, we wouldn't be talking about this big of a number today. So at some point, I mean, I agree, most people that I work with think that I'm extremely conservative, so I get this lecture a lot, but you guys go well beyond me. This scenario, this conservative scenario is not gonna happen. So I just don't want to be like a penny wise and a pound foolish, because someday we're going to have to do all this, and in 10 years, there's going to be another big list of streets to redo. In addition to what we're talking about here, but all this stuff could remain.
I'm not sure we could wait 10 years
No, I don't-
to do another bond election, you know?
No, that's what I was gonna say, just through age and damage, we're going to have a percentage, and I'm assuming it's a substantial percentage of the streets that get to this blue and red point on a yearly basis. So if we don't keep up with it, this number grows exponentially to the point where we can't afford it in a single.
But they have slowed it down, though, with some,
Of course, that's what I'm
the
saying.
preventative maintenance stuff has slowed that down.
So the more we do today,
Agreed.
the less it's gonna hurt on the next time we have to come around and do
When
this.
was the last time before 2020 that we actually did a streets bond package? Before 2020.
We have it all the way back to 85 in here.
No, I'm just.
There it is.
You know,
2003.
03.
Okay.
2003, and then in 94. But because we do a lot of street projects that are not on the GO already, so this is a snapshot for when we've gone to voters, but this does not reflect all the work that we've done. So GO bonds are one way that we fund projects. They're not the total way that we fund them.
So let's get those, I mean, I love the questions, the discussion's great, but some of this information y'all are asking about is a little bit later. But I do want to make the point that, well, she's going to get to it. So I'm going to let her get to her slides because she's going to say it.
Okay, so again, these were the non-GO project recommendations. So we're going to go through just like 5 minutes of budget, everybody's favorite. And so we're going to talk a little bit about tax rates. This is a slide that you guys saw early on when I presented back in August, just as a reminder. When we look at the total amount that people are paying on their tax bill, the city, in terms of that total amount for the current fiscal year, is about 23% of the total amount paid. And when we talk about the city property taxes, we're talking in this committee about the debt portion. That's about 30% of the total amount that people pay to the city. And if we put that together, so there's the total tax bill, the portion we're talking about is about 7 cents on the dollar of what people pay in property taxes. In terms of percentage, that's what we're talking about. So the question for the group is, based on your survey results, if we were to look at an issuance of $135,300,000 in a bond program, what does that do to our property tax rate? So we're looking at a 10-year issuance. You can see how much would be issued on an annual basis to get there, but the projected tax rate would go up about 2 cents. So we go from the 15 to the 17 cents, and this just shows you our math on how we got there on those totals. So again,
You might go back to that slide again.
sure. All my math friends want to read it. They're like, how much?
The
And
far left, or the column on the left, I mean, you're just keeping that ad valorem base static, right?
we are, and it is prudent for us to do so.
I mean,
It-
I'm just
we-
curious to see what a 0.5% a year would do.
And you know what? If we could guarantee the future, we would. But we're going to get to some of why we believe it is most prudent to be very conservative for municipal tax setting. Well, we're going to get there, I promise. We're going to get there. Okay. All right. So again, if we're talking these projects at 135.3, this would be delivered within an estimated 2-cent increase to the tax rate. So one of the questions we had come up last time, this is a slide that you guys have seen before. The dark area shows, based on the current outstanding debt that is on our tax rate, what we're paying per year. And you can see that that goes from current fiscal year all the way out to fiscal year 44. The light blue area shows what is called capacity. That just means if we kept the debt payment the same every year, how much money could we issue in debt and not have an overall increase in our debt payment? So the answer to that question is, with no tax increase, assuming very conservative property tax changes over time, that we could issue $116,880,000. And so again, the same spreadsheet is walking through the math of what does that mean on the tax rate, how much is that issuing per year if we did a 10-year program.
Maybe an unfair question, but if you did this, would you, the word you were using earlier, which is good, would you market this as a no tax increase?
Well, I need to clarify, since this is all being recorded, that the city itself can't market anything. We can educate. That we would have to say, we would say that we don't believe in our educational information, that we don't believe that it would cause a tax increase. However, the state law now requires, and again, y'all are just skipping ahead. She's about to get into it. The state law now requires that regardless of what your estimates are, you have to say for any GO bond that you're putting out there, the ballot language has to say that this would cause a tax increase. It has to say that.
It's in all caps and bold. It's first.
All
Correct.
yeah.
But and there is a difference. It says your taxes will go up, but I'm talking about the tax rate.
Yes.
The educational material can say your
Yes.
tax rate is not projected to be increased by this.
Right, and then when
Sure.
you all form your advocacy committee, you all can get a little bit into more detail about that issue, and we can, so, as a staff.
So no rate increase gets you 116 million and change, and the sum of all the projects was 130 million and change?
The total was north of 155. 135
Was 2 cents.
was the recommendation based on the survey.
Yeah,
But if we,
2 cents difference.
it's 2 cents. But if we did not want to look at, if you all wanted to say we don't want to even propose an increase, then this is that dollar amount.
But you have to say you're proposing an increase anyway. Well, you don't, but the city does. Right.
I might be a little confused here. How does the math work that if we reduce the total debt by 40 million, that which is like a third of the total, but the tax rate increase goes away? How does?
When you go from 155,
Yeah.
you mean to 116?
Yeah, or even from 155 to 135, that's like a 13% decrease, but it reduces the tax rate increase by 50%. Like, how does that?
I think the short answer is you'd have to look at how much is being issued every year versus what we would be paying every
How
year
quick you
in
borrow the
existing
money.
debt. So it's not, they're not structured the exact same, depending on how much total is being issued.
On that, the bottom row, is that how much debt like the city would have at the very bottom?
The very bottom number is showing, so like in column 3, for example, the top amount is showing how much would be issued. That would be the 22 million. And the bottom is showing here's how much it would cost in total, principal and interest. So how much would we be paying per year for that issuance over the term of the bond itself?
20-year bonds.
Oh, yeah, that's why. Okay. That makes the math make a lot more sense. Thank you.
So this is really just to highlight, there would be considerations for, okay, if it was going to be at, about 117 million, then what does that mean in terms of projects? What would you all want to look to deliver if you were wanting to propose this? So we're not making recommendations about this. I wanted to make sure that you all had the information. And going back to the question earlier about required ballot language, remember, if we did nothing, the tax rate is going to go down, right? It's just going to go down. That's that dark shaded area on that tax rate piece, which shows you how much we're paying per year. The rate would just go down. That light blue area, which is our capacity, even if we did not propose to have an increase, it's not going down because we'd be issuing debt, which would keep it where it is. We have to follow state law, and we would have to have included in our ballot language that this is a tax increase. So I don't want that to be confusing for the committee. If you all are proposing the 117 million, we'd still have to have on the bond proposition language that this is a tax increase.
I have a question about the interest rate. So let's say we do a 10-year bond and we issue debt annually. I don't know how that works. Do we get locked in with an interest rate for 10 years? Does it vary according to whenever each year begins and we issue X amount of
Sort of the
dollars
market.
of debt?
So when we issue municipal debt, we go out for a public process where we have people bid on what their terms and conditions are. We then evaluate and recommend to council which of those options that we recommend to move forward. There are times where the submittals are not quite as straightforward as their comparisons are, which is why we have to go through an analysis. So, for example, we could get a response, and this happened to us when we issued debt for the Green Extreme, where we need $5.5 million to do a project. And bidders are telling us, here's what we would say in interest, here's what we'd say on due dates, here's when it's callable, which means you could refinance it versus you couldn't. All those things could vary. They could have interest rates that are the exact same for the entire term. They could have interest rates that are a certain level for a certain number of years and then go to a different rate at some other time. What happened this last time is we actually had a bidder come in and say, listen, I'll pay your premium. I will give you $3 million that you're not going to have to repay, and I'm going to charge you XYZ interest rate. When we compared that, so we're repaying back on a principal of 5.1 million instead of on what it should have been for the total amount for how much we needed in cash. And that ended up being a better option for the city versus financing the full amount. So sometimes premiums, sometimes callable terms, sometimes interest rates, all of those terms can be very different in proposals. But because we have to go out for a public process, we're evaluating sometimes 8, 9, 10 different options for what's going to be the best opportunity for the city. Doesn't happen all the time that there's a premium option, but sometimes there is. Okay, so we want to make sure the committee is aware that when it comes to all things city property taxes, that we are all on the same page, that while the city has a role in property taxes, the city does not control 100% of the property tax process. The state legislature creates laws that we have to abide by, like we just saw with the ballot language. We also have the chief appraiser who is determining value of property. The city does not determine taxable or market values. Property owners also have the ability through applications for exemptions, the ability to protest and other sort of things to influence total values. Of course, every taxing entity is setting their tax rate compliant with state law. And also the tax assessor collector. We don't actually collect property taxes. It's actually collected by the county, and we receive the money from there. So I could bill you all day long, but if you don't pay me, I can't do anything with the difference between what you owed and what you paid. So we also have to work within the reality of our collections, which is something that we have to address all the time. So when we're looking to set our property tax rates, we're also factoring in how much of what we should get paid might we not actually collect. And again, that's not up to the city, right? I'm not billing them, they're not paying me, I'm not setting their values, I don't preside over their hearing if they protest their taxes, I don't set state law. We are sort of in the middle of many factors that go into what happens with property taxes. So one of the things I want to point out to the committee is we have, as an entity, 3 different values we have to consider when setting our property taxes. The first one's going to be market value. That is what the property is valued on the open market. That's sort of the general term for market value. The next one is going to be the appraised value. So this is going to factor in all of your caps. It's going to look at your limitations and growth from one year to the next. So for example, if you own your home, you live in your home, you receive the homestead exemption, your property taxes can't go up by more than 10% one year to the next, which has nothing to do with market value. That's just a cap that's put on the value for your home because you are receiving that homestead exemption. Then there's your taxable value. So your taxable value is going to factor in all of the exemptions or other reductions that actually create the final amount for tax payment. The city does not receive taxes based on market value. The city receives taxes based on taxable value. Does that make sense? So you can see that there's a delta here, right? If the value is at 100%, by the time you get, based on this year's certified values, by the time you get to actual certified taxable values, there's a delta there. It's only about 77% of that market value are we even eligible to collect taxes on. So what does this mean? When we look at what's happened in the city of North Richland Hills, when we look at our taxable values and the information coming to us from the chief appraiser, in fiscal year 2026, 10 years ago, we saw that the difference between market value and taxable value was not that far apart. Look over the 10-year period of time what's happened. There's a pretty wide gap there between what people may be seeing in value in their home, sort of what does the market say your home is worth, and this is only looking at single family values, versus what is actually taxable within that total value. And that happens for a few reasons. So this is a snapshot that we gave when we went through the budget presentation with City Council, just to highlight the difference between what people may think anecdotally about what's happening with values versus what we see on the taxable side. Again, I can't do anything with market values. We only deal with taxable values for the purpose of revenue. In 2024, we were certified with the average market value for single family homes to be $381,951. In 2025, that number was $367,388. That's a pretty big delta from one year to the next. And also, when we think about that, that's market value, right? Taxable value tends to be less than market value. There does tend to be a difference between the two. And what we see on the right-hand side is a snapshot of what's happening in the housing market at that same time. So this is from June. We received certified values in July. So the information on the right is just a snapshot from June of last year. We received our last certified values in July of last year that showed median home listings in the city was about 395,000. And it showed that it was about flat year over year. I'm only giving this example to highlight sometimes when people are thinking about the cost of things or the value of things or sort of what the market is doing, that information is not the same as what actually happens in city finance, and we have to operate within what happens within city finance.
So, I'm sorry, go back to that slide. That's, right, it's market, it's not taxable.
Correct.
And it went down from, on the residential side, it went down from 24 to 25.
Yes.
News to me. Okay.
Yes. One of the things that helps to create kind of that gap when we show the difference between market value and taxable value has to do with certain exemptions that we have adopted as an organization that benefits our residents. One of them is our senior exemptions. You can see in this example from 2015, we had a little north of 4,000 properties who were receiving the senior or disabled exemption. This exemption creates both a $36,000 discount or exemption, and it creates a ceiling for how much people pay. So the year that someone turns 65 and they file for this exemption, the way that this works is you're not paying any more in dollars. It's no longer attached to the rate or your value. It's sitting there at a dollar amount, unless you happen to have, for some reason, something go down in your value. So I know a lot of exemptions have hit at the state level that have changed the taxable value for some properties. So there are some people who all of a sudden saw themselves paying less who were receiving the senior exemption. But generally speaking, once you hit that ceiling, it is going to create a cap. We're not going to receive any more money from that property until or unless the exemption changes for the property for any reason. Or they do expansions, major improvements on the home, those sort of things. But if you're sitting steady, the house is what it is, and the same owner is there receiving that exemption, this is creating a gap. Well, we can see over time how that number has increased. We also have done projections based on the increases we have experienced for what that increase will look like over the next 5 years. So again, this is not about our rate or the values. This is on a cash basis, what we can receive from those properties based on when they became eligible for the exemption. We also had, starting in 2024, something that's called the circuit breaker limitation. This is a law that was passed at the state level. It is in place for 3 tax years, but once you put a tax in place, a lot of times it stays, so we'll see if the legislature keeps it in place. But long story short, this is a snapshot directly off of TAD's website. This is a limitation on growth in properties that are valued at $5 million. We're not talking residential properties, we're talking non-residential, where that growth from one year to the next can't exceed a certain limit of 20%. But what's going to be on the horizon for us next fiscal year that we've never had happen, it's already passed the legislature, but it goes into effect for next year, is an exemption for business personal property. So we're pretty used to seeing residential exemptions and caps and those sort of things, but now we're seeing them happen on the business end of the house as well. So for business personal property, and I've listed the definition here, it's furniture, fixture, equipment, machinery, computer, so on and so forth, the kind of things that are in a business and help it to operate. The increase in those exemptions will go from $2,500 to $125,000. It is in one fell swoop, all at one time. It'll hit us next fiscal year. That is not something our council voted to do. We have to comply with state law. When we get our tax roll, this exemption will already be factored in. For the city of North Richland Hills, this is what it means. So we've got here listed the number of business personal property accounts. Right now, about 323 of those are exempt because the total amount that they have in inventory is so low that they're not even subject to this tax. But after the exemption, we'll have almost 1,300 businesses that'll be fully exempt from BPP. And you can see that percentage going up to 82%. You can see our average BPP taxable value is about $216,000. That's going to go down to $177,000. But the big takeaway here is the value. When we talk about our taxable value on our roll, $60 million of that will be lost as of next fiscal year. Has nothing to do with city council. It has nothing to do with decisions that we've made here for our property tax rate or anything else. It's because of the exemptions that are being afforded to businesses starting next year. Yes, sir.
I guess I never thought about this, but backing of the general obligation bonds will be property taxes, not business property taxes, right?
Property taxes do not differentiate for the purpose of setting our rate. We don't set one rate for businesses and then a different rate for residents. It's one rate, so it's based on all the taxable value in the city. All of that factors into what is your total tax rate.
So bonds are backed by not only the tax on the dirt in my house, but also the painting at some engineer's office in town.
I'm sorry.
If it's business personal property.
Yes, business. You're right. If you're asking if businesses are subject to business personal property, yes.
No, I'm saying business personal property taxes are part of the security for the general obligation bond.
They are, because they're part of the total taxable value of the city.
Okay. So
yes.
When we say property taxes, you're right. Most people think just their residential property
what I always
taxes,
thought.
or maybe their commercial, like real estate, building. But But our property tax revenue includes things like the business personal property taxes and those types of things. So,
It includes mineral rights and all kinds of things.
all of those things are included. So yes, the total GOs are backed by property tax revenue. Yeah.
As far as the actually property value itself, I mean, we do have one or two apartment complexes in North Richland Hills. Those apartments, the taxes are figured on rental rates, not the actual value of the commercial structures, right?
No, they're
No,
they're
it's not-
figured
it's
on the
not-
value of the structure. The value
It
of
is
the
the value of the
structure.
structure and
Yes.
not on the rents they charge.
Correct.
So it's not the rental value they get taxed on, it is the actual.
It's not income-based,
It's
no.
not income-based. Okay.
It's just like your home property tax is based on your land and structure appraisal. That's the same thing for multifamily, commercial, anything, except that commercial also, businesses get charged a tax on business and personal property.
But is there, and this may be a question that's more for Tad than it would be for this body, but what's the valuation of their price? Is that based upon what they can collect, or is it just based upon the appraised value of the structure?
Our total valuation,
For an apartment, yeah, for an apartment.
no, it's based on the value.
Okay.
It's based on the appraised value.
Mhm. The land and the structure.
Right.
No, I'm just trying to, I'm always doing this game of trying to figure out, equivalencies. Like, if you had somebody who's got a $2,000 a month apartment, but you've got somebody who's got a $300,000 house, who's paying more in taxes?
The apartment payer, the guy's not paying any taxes directly. His
I
owner-
under,
his owner-
who's net effective paying more taxes? So,
That's a big question for analysis on
Yeah.
another day, but, but good question, sure, 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 yeah.
That's kind of the,
Sure.
what I was asking that
Sure.
for was, if anybody's taxes go up, it likely it's gonna have effect on rent.
It could, it could. And when we convert value into revenue, so we look at what's our tax rate times that revenue change for the city of North Richland Hills. If we were looking at this at the no new revenue rate for the current year, then that would have been a loss of revenue sitting at about $300,000. So it's real dollars and cents affecting our budget as this will go into effect for next fiscal year. Okay, this is not Trudy's opinion. And this is a screenshot. This is a screenshot. This is not Trudy's opinion. The next 3 slides are not Trudy's opinion, and they are a screenshot, unaltered.
So this is your.
Also, you'll notice there's underlining. That is not Trudy's underlining.
That is not
That
Trudy's
is how it
underlining.
appears on Governor Abbott's website.
We are going to be, as our city council has charged us, transparent and fiscally responsible. And so we're going to provide some disclosures. The governor has provided a 5-point plan that he is proposing to consider for all kinds of property tax relief. And I did include the link if anyone is interested in going directly to the link to view it for yourself. The first 3 are for local spending. So you'll note the highlighted area in the first section talks about limiting local government spending to population plus inflation, or 3.5%, the lesser of the 2. The next one is about a 2/3 voter approval for tax increases. And then the next one is for if 15% of registered voters in a local area sign a petition, they can force a rollback election to lower taxes. The fourth one is that all properties would be appraised only once every 5 years. And the homestead appraisal cap would reduce from 10% to 3%. And this also would expand a cap to all properties. All properties. So not just homestead properties, all properties. And the final one, it would consider elimination of school district property tax on homeowners. So when we go into our scenarios about our property taxes, one of the reasons we want to be conservative is because we respect the fact that we are one part of a much larger system that is determining what happens on property taxes. And so when we go to our citizens and we talk about the impact of our decisions, we want to be sure that we've accounted for what we can We can't control it, but we want to account for the things that we know of that could impact the statements that we're making to our citizens. So we are very conservative on purpose, so that we don't find ourselves in any sort of situation where we've said something that we did not feel fully confident in terms of our own financial standing and the things that we're saying to our residents. So we're going to go into a couple of comparisons, but I want us to make sure that we keep that in context. So the first thing we'll talk about are population differences, how you can compare us to our neighboring cities. I don't know if everyone knows how much bigger we are than some of these other cities. When it comes to property tax rate, this is where we fall. We're looking at cities in Tarrant County. So it's just cities, but it's all of Tarrant County. And you can see that we're kind of in that bottom third. It's like the one time being close to the bottom is good. Yes, sir.
Does the city of Grapevine have a senior tax freeze?
I think they do, but their property values are not like ours.
I don't think Grapevine has a senior tax freeze.
They may, but their values are so high that their rate is low, but the values are so high that what their citizens pay on average is a multiple of what citizens in North Richland Hills pay. We have several benchmark comparisons. We can get you that information. So when we look at what's happened with our property tax rate, I want everybody to remember when we did bond elections. So we did one in 2012, which made our tax rate go up a little bit. Remember, it went up to 61 cents at that time. Then we also did another bond election in 2020. I've highlighted in green here the property tax rate for 22 because the election happened in November of 2020, which means it was fiscal year 2020-2021. So the first tax year that saw the impact of that election was actually in 22. But you can see here that the tax rate went down. So since 2017, we've seen the tax rate go down by 11 cents. So again, yes, we had a bond election. Yes, we told the voters that we could have a tax rate increase. What we've actually done is see our rate go down by quite a bit.
And so, but what's different now, and the reason we, like Teresa said, we need to be more conservative in our estimate, although is that there's just things that exist now out of our control that didn't exist then. So for example, we do already have a cap on our revenue that we can collect from property tax and to stay under the no new revenue rate. So that's already in existence. Already they started the every other year appraisal, which impacts our appraisals not increasing, or values not increasing as much as they would have, because in that odd year that they don't appraise, you're not going to see an increase in your certified values. And in fact, this year our certified values were essentially flat.
For single family, they were flat.
So those are the things that allowed us to still be able to decrease the tax rate in that time frame, but the pressure from to lower the property taxes for folks that's coming from our state government, it will make it so that, you know, we can show people that's what actually happened. Also, we can't guarantee that the same thing will happen again. Does that make sense? Because of the further constraints that they're putting on it.
But for instance, you're carrying the 2025 ad valorem base flat through, right?
Yes, because TAD is not going to reappraise till 27. So
I mean, we have land that's been turned into lots that are going to be turned
Right.
into homes. All
Sure.
of that, which is worth, I don't know, but just call it $200 million or something. That additional base is going to be carried through for the whole 10 years. So there's already stuff in the pipe that will be present every year of the 10, regardless of whether it's all flat. So just that right there, you know you have, but you're not counting it.
I appreciate the comment, and I understand. I understand your sentiment. I do.
So really, it's got to trend negative to offset that.
What we want to be careful in our projections to show, yes, we anticipate new construction. The lag between when those hit our tax roll and therefore what's going to be our rate for that year depends on when TAD does appraisals. If it's not on the ground January 1, it's not going to hit our roll for that year. So there's just factors into timing and total amount, caps, and other sort of things that we know of and that we look to include. I appreciate you want us to not be as conservative in our estimates. I understand the sentiment. But when we're also trying to offset other caps that are hitting that haven't hit yet with new construction, where do we land in the offset, the positives and negatives? How much do we actually have hit the roll if we happen to be in a year that's not getting a reappraisal? I mean, there's just a lot of nuances that have happened here lately. The TAD decided to do that reappraisal plan in '24, and they've kept us steady.
Vacant lot in 2025, and in 2026 it gets a house put on it. Are you telling me there's a chance that in 2027 it may still be taxed as a vacant lot?
In '27, it should be noted as of January 1st that there's a home there, what the value of it is at that time.
If the home is completed by January 1st, yes.
But in your example,
Well,
it's-
so I mean, it's not like people can game the system and get a free year tax-free.
No. No, but what we're saying is for us, we can't bet on that. Like, we can't factor in, oh, there's gonna be this much this year, because we don't know the timing of when that's gonna, those vacant lots are gonna get fully constructed and hit the rolls.
Well, I mean, every
Yeah.
developer out there wants to file their plat as quickly as they can.
Well, I
So
know.
process that plat.
And they do, and then they don't build for a while. Anyway,
I mean,
that's a separate
I've
conversation,
always
Justin.
been just, it's blown my mind. It's like, why won't you let me file this plat? And then I get into December and I'm like, sorry, I'm on
Wait till
vacation.
January.
Yeah.
Anyways. So it's the timing of when the values hit, and also we can't guarantee that. And the only year we get to not count, new construction value doesn't count against your no new revenue calculation, and only that first year that it hits the roll, right? So it's not like we can not count that additional 2 million for 10 years. Does that make sense? That's what I'm saying.
So for the revenue rate, the market value will go up when that new house hits the ground, but it may not be taxed income yet, but
Right.
it will be impacted as the limit order.
But also what I'm saying is, we do get to factor out the total value of new construction on the roll that 1 year in our truth in taxation calculation. So we get to take that out. It doesn't count against us. But then, in the future years, that new value is, I say count against us. And don't get me to trying to explain the truth in taxation calculation sheet that's 10 pages long. But anyway, the new construction only benefits us for the 1 year that it hits in terms of in terms of not affecting the tax rate.
So there are, okay, go ahead.
You have a question?
Back to, you had a question first.
No, sorry, I'm sorry.
I mean, you guys have to be conservative, we can't speak to these growth numbers, but when we get into the marketing committee, we can.
Yes.
Okay.
We can say things like, last time we said 4 cents and it went down however many cents. We can say that because it's factual.
Of course.
We can't.
You can't estimate future.
Right.
Yeah, I understand.
Yes, ma'am.
You were saying how we're not going to be taxed in 2026, but we will be in 2027 from the TAD?
So TAD, it's not that properties won't be taxed. TAD adopted a plan, their board adopted a plan that says that they would not reappraise for residential properties. So whatever they appraised values at in 2024, they were not going to go back and reappraise until 2027.
And
But
we can petition to have it done or more so that we don't see a jump? Because I went to TAD and watched them do that petition, and I think they got approved, but I don't know that for a fact.
You can protest your values.
your individual
Is what you're
property.
talking. Your individual property value.
The cities went. These were 3 cities that went to petition.
So there has been a lot of activity from all the entities that TAD provides services to about the reappraisal plan. There's been a lot of concern over compliance with all kinds of standards based on what's happening with appraisals and so on and so forth. It's different for different entities. Schools have certain things they have to meet, as opposed to cities and so on and so forth. We have been in contact with TAD. Their board voted, and their staff is doing as their board has directed. But we certainly have been and remain in contact with TAD. One thing to remember when we talked earlier about that difference between the 24 single family values and the 25. So even in a year where properties were not reappraised, we did see for us, our values went down from TAD because TAD also still allowed people to protest their taxes. So even though they didn't reappraise you, you could still file for a protest. And what we saw from our numbers is that a lot of people did, and a lot of people were successful in that venture. And I only say that to say what we collect in taxes is based on factors that the city does not directly have any control over. And values are an example of something we don't get to set. The other thing that goes into this, and I don't want to, I'm sure everyone would love to be in a budget lesson, but I want to be careful to keep the issue the issue. The other thing that happens is we could get our certified roll, and then people file for, not just file for a protest, but they also could file a lawsuit or something else. So on that collection piece, we have also found that there are times where we have refunds that we're issuing for property taxes as well. It's not just a one-way street where we collect. And so those are the sort of things that also affect our total tax rate as well, because if we were expecting to get revenue and then for some reason we didn't, or the value went down after it was certified, and all of a sudden now we owe someone tax money back that they paid, that also is being factored into what's happening with our rate and value. So we're conservative because we want to be honest about there's a lot of nuances that go into this and a lot of pressures that are on us now in 26 that weren't on us the last time we did a bond election. But our city council has taken several actions in order to reduce property taxes. We've already talked about the fact that we have that senior exemption. The council also increased the homestead exemption. That's what the city can do. That's something the council can do. They did that to the highest amount that's allowed by state law, which is 20%. Again, the tax rate has decreased. So if we just look at 2020 to now, it's decreased by 13%. The council adopted the no new revenue rate in 23. They also adopted a rate below the no new revenue rate in 24 and in 25. So when we talk about property taxes, we are really focused here on the debt portion, but let's remember when people pay their property taxes, they're paying for services as well. So one chart on one side is showing the revenue side of the house. So you can see property taxes make up about 43% of what we get in our general fund. So that's how we're paying for operations within the city. And then on the right-hand side, you see what we are paying for. Revenues and expenditures are equal. That's what we call a balanced budget. So when you look at these percentages, they correlate directly to each other. So when we receive 43% in property taxes and about 22% in sales tax, on the other hand, you can see that we spend about 60% on public safety, about 12% on infrastructure, parks, administration, so on and so forth. That public safety number is going to include police, fire, and municipal court. That's all included in the number of public safety. So that's just in the general fund. We talked earlier about we're going to start with the end in mind. We just want to remind everyone, who are we doing this for? Who's really impacted by the types of projects that we're talking about? This is a word cloud, just really giving a visual for who is it that's going to be affected by the various projects that we are considering. And just to help put some of that in context, we've talked about the number of patrons that visit the library. We talked about that early on when we talked about the project, about 200,000 people every year. But when we talk about the entire city, we're talking about over 1 million people who are visiting businesses, they're driving on our streets, they could receive services from many of our departments on any given day. This lists some of the businesses, including our parks department and facilities, that do have a number of visitors that are coming to our facilities. We're going to send you guys another survey. It's going to be anonymous. We want to allow you all the opportunity to think about some of the information we've provided you with today. You're going to get it by Friday. Could be sooner, but for sure by Friday. It'll be due on the 25th. Want to remind folks that when it comes to these surveys, they close automatically. We don't reopen them. They are anonymous. We will send you out reminders to make sure that you didn't just get it one time and that we set it and forget it. Our next meeting is going to be on March the 4th. So we'll be back here, I believe, on March the 4th. So we will have survey results back when we meet the next time. And then we're going to have a little bit of a gap. Remember, in March, we had to move meetings. So our next meeting after the 4th is going to be on the 31st. We'll be back in the community room where we were for the first meetings. For next steps, we'll talk next month. We'll keep massaging it. We'll keep getting feedback. We'll keep doing updates. We'll keep updating and gut checking where you all feel like we need to be. In April, we're hoping that perhaps we can have a finalized project list, and then in May and June, late May, early June, to then have a project list submitted to City Council. Then it's in their hands to take action from there to officially decide if they agree with you and they want to present these to the voters, and also to set that proposition language, and then in July and August to officially take that action and for the committee to formally be able to begin educating the public on the projects and also the election. Okay, now it's your turn. I appreciate you, Lisa. Thank you.
Judy, Paulette, or the staff?
Justin, you got any questions?
No, they answered them all.
I think Justin already won them out.
Susie?
Y'all were aware. how
Susie has a question back there.
That the tax increase is theoretical. I'll remind you of that next time.
Okay,
All right,
thank you.
Susie?
Okay, I'm not a math person. I really have to study it, but you know that the slide 47, the taxable value impact after exemption changes, and it says it's a loss of, what is that, $60 million?
In value. Mm-hmm.
That's the loss in value.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
That's not money that
No.
we're losing.
Not tax, the tax revenue number's on 48 at the bottom.
Yeah, it's the next slide. So it's the 290,000. That's the loss in revenue.
Okay, I can't see it. What is it?
290,000 and some change.
Okay, so that's what the city would be losing.
Right. And we will next year.
Yeah.
We already know.
Well,
going in, we're already.
So I just, keep thinking about this and, it's gonna come out to marketing. Because when you look at the taxable, our tax rates over the years and how much it's gone down, and if people are really paying attention to their tax bill, then homeowners, they got a significant reduction this past year.
Not just from the city, on your total
Right,
bill, you got
total
even
bill.
more because of the increases in the school district exemption.
Right, and
Yeah.
so, if you think of it that way, I saved this amount of money this year, which, the last time I paid the amount of money that we paid in taxes this year, that was 10 years ago. And so then, are you gonna show us what the increase would be, how much an average homeowner would be paying additional with it's not very much.
Yeah, so yes. So last time we talked about if it was a 4-cent increase, yes, it'd be $114 a year. So it'd be half that.
Well over $1,000 and up from this patent, then you've got 10 years almost worth of savings right there to get you, through the bond.
Exactly.
But it's on how it's presented, making people understand it.
Right.
Okay, thank you for, now I understand.
Okay, I think John has a question here.
I do. Maybe I missed something again in the meeting. The advocacy committee, what is that? And
So we kind of touched on it at the beginning, but if the council chooses to call the election, then members of this group could form an advocacy committee. Because
and how would we do that?
it has to be separate from the city, so you'd set up your own, sort of like a political action committee is basically what it is. So a PAC that would organize and create materials that would advocate for the bond propositions. Public funds can't be spent for advocacy, so we have to be very careful in any information that we put out that it is just factual and it doesn't use any words that advocate one way or another for the propositions. So,
And who
so
better
the things
than,
y'all are talking about doing, and Susie's correct, everybody's been correct, and it's gonna be about the marketing, and that's great. So then this group can form a committee to to market and advocate.
I just didn't know if that was a mechanism as a, or just something that was optional that this group would do on their own.
And who better to be that advocate than those that have been educated for several months of what it means? And you all have some influence or you wouldn't be here. The council, mayor felt that you were open-minded, willing to listen, learn, and hopefully to be willing to educate. So we can do that better than anyone.
And this happens at the school board, at the school district level too, because the school board members and the staff came to advocate.
Yeah, I was just wanting to know if there was a decision like it was actually part of the mechanism of this committee or something that was, okay.
Voluntary only.
I understand.
Yeah. Joe, you have a question? Your hand was up.
No, I withdraw my.
Now you gotta ask.
Where y'all gonna get your money, Joe?
Any other questions?
Anything else?
Any other questions? Joe? Thank you. It looks like a lot of y'all did, or everybody did their homework. A lot of good questions, staff. Thank you to staff. Seeing none, we'll go on to number 9, and that's public comments. An opportunity for citizens to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee on matters which are scheduled on this agenda for consideration by the committee, but not scheduled as a public hearing. In order to address the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee during public comments, a public meeting appearance card must be completed and presented to the recording secretary prior to the start of the 2025 Capital Program Advisory Committee meeting. There were no requests, okay. Again, thank y'all. March 4th is our next meeting. It'll be at the same location, same time, same snacks.
Same snacks.
What? Yeah, it's on Wednesday.
What are you saying?
Same snacks since y'all didn't take them, so. All right, we'll stand adjourned. Thank y'all.